We're recording. Awesome. Yeah. So just a couple, I think I put some stuff on the agenda. Right on the top, someone internally has written like a traversal kind of framework for Substrate Go for Go-based plans. We're using it internally. They're looking at adding it to the upstream. I would appreciate someone with more Go experience looking at it, because I could probably look at it and be like, this API looks reasonable, but I'm Java build, so it may not actually be Go-ish. But I thought I'd talk about that. Second item on the agenda right now is I have a old pull request to get rid of any as a valid return type. Specifically in the context of, there's some discussion in that thread about, I guess for context, if you have a function that returns any, and there's no, not like any one, any two, any three, any four, right? There's an unbound any. It sort of means that that thing can return anything, right? So it's at the type level, it's seems kind of bananas to have something like that that's not bound, which is like kind of where that request came from. And the one feature that kind of came up in that thread on the PR was about a function called fromAvro that someone wrote that takes as input like a binary input and a schema string effectively. And the output is like an any, but at runtime, the output type is based on the schema type. And I wasn't sure if that was a thing that we wanted to model that way, or if we want to have a different way to model that.
So first I would say that, like, I believe that the intention, I'm not saying my intention, but I could say my intention, is that any is bound as well. And then there was some confusion about it. So if there's only one any, you don't have to give it a number. Was, I believe, the intention.
Any zero.
Yeah, it's any zero, but the zero is missing, kind of thing. Like, I think that we didn't really do a good job of formalizing that early on. Because I think originally I used he a lot of places because I was a Java guy. As opposed to any.
Okay, and then actually, whether we've written it into the spec actually contradicts that, where any we said that any is explicitly unbound, like it can be literally anything. There's no, the requirement in the spec is written now is that all the any ones have to be the same things, all the any twos have to be the same thing, all the any threes have to be the same thing within an invocation, and then any is like, no, there's no correlation at all.
I think that that's fine as long as we say that the any can't be used as an output type.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the reason we have unbound is so that you can have something that takes in multiple
like
different
type
things.
of. But here's the thing is that, like, why I think the only example that I can come up with where that would be relevant is in a what's it called, where you can put like an arbitrary number of arguments.
Variable or
Variadic.
variant.
Yeah, variadic. Yeah, so I think the only place where that adds any capability is in variadic, right? Because you use any one.
What is any capability? Like having a variadic of any?
The difference between any and any one, or any two, any n. The only difference that I can see is in the case where we have a variadic function, and we want all of the arguments of the variadic to be anything, but they can be different anythings. But you can't define an arbitrary variadic where, like, if I used any one variadic, then it would have to all be any ones. So it seems like that's the only case where any is more powerful on input than any one or any two, right? Because any one is unbound as well, except to other any ones. So if you don't use any one once, it's the same as any. As a cat. I thought it was a piece of clothing, and then I realized it was a cat. Cat does not want you on the call this morning.
I guess if you have a function that only has a single any argument, then it's sort of implicitly an any one, because there's no correlation you need to worry about. It's once you have multiple any's, you might want to bind the any. And to your point, having any for variadic functions makes sense. And I think
I think that's the only place it makes sense. I'm saying.
Gotcha.
Because I don't see how, as long as we define it as not being allowed an output, I don't see how any would be any different than any one.
Any would be any from anyone.
And
Except in the
anyone-
case of variadic.
like unbound is something we're avoiding, right? Like when you said anyone would also be unbound in that case, and therefore invalid.
Yeah, we don't see T. We don't have T extends V or whatever, right? Like we don't have a.
No, I think the mission of that function was like this can return anything and you won't know till runtime, and that
Yeah,
is not-
we don't want to support that. Yes.
that was your original question, right, Victor? Or
Yeah, that's kind of where this came from. When I was looking at signatures for things, it's like, what does it mean for a function to return an unbounded any? Specifically in the context of a function that takes no arguments and returns an unbounded any. It's like, that's
invalid.
really hard to work with. And that's kind of where that PR came from. And there was like one use case that was kind of like putting, you want it to be an unbound any because you want to be able to, like, at runtime based on an input derive the output type.
Yeah. So well, I was gonna answer that part of it. So, I believe, and I think if I recall correctly, we have not specified this. I think, David, we had talked about it at some point when we were working on some Sundeck stuff. I believe that we should support the use of so the schema output type derivation language, whatever you want to call that little sub expression thing. Supports inspecting the types of our input arguments, but it does not support inspecting the values right now. I do believe that it should support inspecting the values of constant arguments. So you can define a function to have some arguments be constant arguments. And so I believe that the return type derivation should support inspection of the values of constant arguments. Or maybe we say a limited set of constant types. Maybe we don't support all of them to start. We just support strings or something like that. Because I think that is actually the way that we would express the function you're talking about, Victor.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to pass in, say, a schema along with, say, JSON and say, interpret this JSON or this AVR or whatever as the schema,
mm-hmm.
you would define that function as having the schema being a constant type. And then the return type derivation would be able to inspect the value of the schema to understand what the actual type output would be for a given invocation.
Yeah, so you could do it at the type level. You could also, the other way to do it would be to actually allow, like, have value binary as the input, value like output type, and be able to encode the output type explicitly in the function and then have that be the return. It's like having an any one input type, which is the output type, then you use anyone as the output type, which, like, I guess pushes it onto the producer of the plan to be like, here's the average schema, translate it into a substrate type that you then put in the function. So the function becomes binary input, substrate type, output substrate type.
I've been dealing with this problem this week with Postgres. Postgres has set returning functions that require an as clause in order to define the type of what's actually in there. I've been trying to implement a Substrate extension for Postgres, and so from Substrate takes a Substrate plan and then returns the names and types, the records with the names and types, but it needs an as clause. So I mean, if I broke down, I could probably do it at the query rewrite, at the raw query rewrite, and then create an as clause by inspecting the constant plan and then actually generating it. But that's incredibly complex. So I've ended up just having to, if the as clause doesn't match, I just return the right as clause and let the caller fix it afterwards.
Right, what's the kind of, yeah, it's set returning functions that, what was it, derive the output type at runtime, or no?
It's not at runtime. It's actually known when the query plan comes in because it's a constant. It's computable, but it's not computable by our language expression because it's binary bytes for a plan or
Okay.
JSON.
So I said something. There's two things here. One is like the any unbound output type we don't want to support. But there's also a use case for like type computations in functions that either being to embed types in functions or compute them somehow is a gap that we have.
Yeah, and maybe
Yeah,
maybe the solution. I mean, if you force the caller to tell you what the types are, then you don't I mean, which is what the as clause does in Postgres, then you don't necessarily need to compute it in the definition, or I don't think you need to compute it.
Yeah, it doesn't really be computable in like this in the you can either have a derivation mechanism in the YAML definition for it, or you can say caller like give me a type that I can use for this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember what is the name of the is it called function invocation? I'm looking trying to like, find the proto
function
for
invocation, yeah.
it's in algebra. Should be in algebra, right?
Yeah. Scalar function. I guess no, sorry. It's scalar function and window function don't have an invocation. There's an aggregate function invocation.
Oh, okay.
But
That's
yeah, the
why.
scalar function
Okay.
takes the arguments which are bound and then options.
I'm inclined to I'm inclined to add an additional property to a function definition. This is my immediate response. I like your idea, Victor, and I think it's kind of, rather than trying to create an arbitrary expression language to express what return type would be, I like the idea of just saying like, hey, it's a problem for the person who's creating the plan, because they know. I think that they would know. And define the function such that I don't know. I want to think about this more, but like my initial thought is to define an additional like a sentinel value for the return type derivation, which is that it is maybe it's a sentinel function, which is it's like f of one or more of the input arguments.
Mm-hmm.
Where the input arguments all have to be constants. I don't know. So basically, the return type derivation has things like, a plus b and, a divided by b and things like that. Define one, which is like opaque function, which takes in the value of, argument b, right? In your case where you say like it's a binary and then a schema, right? The string. It says take in the string argument. But the function is basically says it's a opaque function which takes this in. Or we could just define it actually. Like that's the other question is like whether or not we need this to be unlimited in terms of its expressibility, or we just say we add a new return type derivation, which is an Avro schema mapper, another one which is like JSON schema mapper. We add a few of these functions in the return type derivation. And they are specific for those circumstances. Because I don't know how many there are. I'm not sure that there are 5,000 of these.
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm going to say at this point is that I think out the things that I want to know, which is one, don't do any. Two, we do want to support we don't want unbound any. We want to support this use case. It is actually a real use case we want to support, and we can figure out both of them offline. I don't think we're going to cut a solution here, but yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Actually, I guess before I do the next thing, someone put DuckDB substrate extension. Do you want to do that before we go to PR bumps?
Okay, so for the DuckDB substrate extension is out of date. I have a PR which I thought was pretty close to fixing it because they added a new feature called a table filter for expressions, which they say it's for pushdowns, but it's not well documented how it works. And when we encounter those, we cannot convert them correctly. We're not getting the right results. Yeah, I do not understand what the feature does. So converting it to substrate is difficult. So if somebody else could look and see what table filter the expression, the new expression type actually does, that would be useful. Because I think it's been, the 1.3 came out like 4 weeks ago or something like that. And we still haven't gotten a release out.
They don't have any documentation.
Yeah, they don't have any documentation, which is, I put in a request for documentation on the substrate thing, and the issue has no response, because
Issue. Yeah.
Yep.
Is it so you're right now treating it as like yeah, I don't know.
I guess
Man, that's like one sentence of description, which is not very helpful.
Yeah.
is it blocking the update because you need to handle it, or could we just handle it as a like unsupported right now? See,
Maybe start with that.
They're optimizing, and so we hit it with a simple query.
Hmm.
I mean, if you could force optimization off, probably it would work, but it just by accident, easy things hit it. So it's like 3 things fail in our test suite.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a new feature, I could just not do it, but it's it's being used actively. I think I could try to go through and try to figure out, look at optimized plans versus not optimized plans, but yeah, it's a pain.
yeah, okay, that's good to know, and also unfortunate. I don't have much of a.
Have you had many conversations with ChatGPT on it? Like given it the class and said like, hey, explain to me what the purpose of this thing is and how it's used and what's the right way to convert it to substrate?
I haven't done that. I have tried to get it to actually write the new functionality, and what it comes up with is close to what I have
Nonsense.
and sometimes wrong. But it's generally what I've got there. But yeah, trying to get it to explain it probably is a better approach. I'll try that.
Yeah, my experience with the AI tools in general is it's all about the right scope of context. Like being like, hey, here's this table filter file. What is its purpose? How does it work? What is it trying to achieve? And then like build on that is what I try to do. That's literally what I'm trying to do right now. I'm like, what is this file? What does it do? I don't know.
All right. That's a good thing. I'll try that.
Yeah, but cool. The signal flare is sent up, so someone who's looking at DuckDB or knows about it can help you out maybe.
Yeah, it might be posted on the Substrate Slack as well.
Actually, that's a good idea. Someone there might actually know or care about this.
There are people that care. I think there is actually a thread. But yeah, we can
Oh, is that okay?
make it more clear that there's an issue.
Cool.
Yeah, that's it for that. Then you wanted to talk about the dialect stuff.
Yeah, just like PR bumps and dialects is one of them.
Yeah, so the user-defined stuff, I think I made a change. I basically changed it to reference instead of using the protobuf type. I've switched it to be YAML based.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's using it's the same thing as functions. It's the name of the import dot the name of the type. So that seems reasonable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For parameterized type, you were talking about the precision timestamp, being able to say, I just want precision timestamp 6 or precision timestamp 9.
Like 3 and 6.
But I can't handle 5 or 4.
Yeah.
Something like that. I think that is interesting, but it adds a lot more work for what the main purpose of types is, which is to help restrict which functions you can look at. Because you're looking at the signature that would have been like function name underscore argument 1 type, argument 2 type, and we don't include those things in those stuff. I mean, you could obviously eliminate those when you're trying to construct it. So that it doesn't. It's not impossible. It's just annoying. But beyond that, it's like the values are more constrained by the function definitions themselves. So if you wanted to, you could have a function that said, I only support precision timestamp 3, and have the restriction there instead, because that's where we have the computation. And for decimal, I mean, it gets even more. So you have decimal.
I wasn't thinking about restrictions. For decimal, I was thinking like you can define decimal, you can try and define restrictions on it. I was mostly thinking about it from the context of precision specifically, because a lot of the functions that we have like take precision timestamp p as input, and then it's like, well, if we only want specific values of those, or we only allow, and the trick is you can define variants that take like specific precisions, but then that's not in the core spec. They have to use different names because the short names don't include the parameterized type. So like, 2 timestamp p for like, 2 timestamp, no, or like from timestamp p3, from timestamp p6, from timestamp p9. You couldn't have all 3 of those because those will all collide in like the short name reference. Or I guess at the type level, I guess no. Actually, maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe the YAML it's fine because like the full signature is different. They're not the same signature. But then like the short name, you have to be like, oh, I have 2 or like from timestamp p something, and then based on the runtime, the position you've given.
Remember that the names inside of Substrate don't really matter.
Names inside of Substrate don't really matter.
Like you could name those functions like from timestamp T2 or T2, T4, and T6.
That's fair. You can just have the variants.
Like name conflicts in Substrate, like because it's not like I know people kind of naturally think of it as like the same as the name that's used inside the dialect. But really it can just be like completely different names.
And in fact, for some cases like and use like, oh well, I have a binary version of and which is an operator, and I need to have a different version of that than the one that's multi-arg, because I want to also have a 2-arg function version, and so we ended up like having 3 instances of and, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember, but you put them in different YAML files. That's the thing. You can either put them in different YAML files, or you can put them in.
I guess the thing that I'll say actually, I think it's fine to not include restrictions initially. I think we might want to eventually. One thing I'm going to say is like, okay, cool. If we want to say that these system supports like P3, P6, P9, and we want those to be like interoperable in the ecosystem, that means for every timestamp handling function that takes a precision timestamp with generic P, we also want 3 additional variants to restrict those types. So this is going to be like, I support only 3 and 6 function variants and not the any. So it does kind of blow up the number of functions we need. I'm also not worried about this because if we want to add restrictions in the future, we can. Like, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I'm struggling with, Victor, as an alternative, is the level of complexity about whether or not a function is legal in a certain engine becomes very complex otherwise, right? Because if you're saying like, because then you have to look at output type derivation rules, because the function may say take in, P1 and P2, right? And then it says output P3, which is defined as, some arbitrary calculation on P1 and P2. Now you've got to be like, well, can I use this function because it's going to output? My assumption would be is that in that case, I don't actually. Let me step back. Do we have any timestamp functions which alter the precision?
They should.
I guess like truncate. There's like a truncate. I assume that would alter
Some
precision.
some languages just change it to always be like precision 12.
Yeah.
So I took in any and it's always P12.
Yeah, that's the complexity, Victor. I think I agree with you that there's lots of systems that only support some subset of the precisions. I think that
3 plus
it
P6.
makes it. I mean, like the system that like Curemia, we originally only supported 6, I think, or 3. I can't remember. I think micros can fit in an 8-byte integer and have a huge range, but nanos can't. Because 6 is micros, I think. And so yeah, the problem is with nanos, you have to, I think when you go to 7 or above, you have to go to 12 bytes. You have to go to more than 8 bytes. Yeah, so anyway, I've definitely seen systems that support only a subset. Like some, like, I think, yeah, I want to say that like a very common system. I don't know if it was Spark or Snowflake or something else recently. Maybe Snowflake had just recently increased it so that you could actually do like, beyond 9. I think it was.
No, the Apple computation thing is interesting because it does interact in a way that you could theoretically have. Well, I guess the other thing is if you're producing a plan and you're calling these functions and you're following the type derivation, that in the producer you'll be like, oh, I'm trying to create a thing of output 12, but I only support 9, and then the producer will be able to blow up there. Versus what would happen now is you do it, you'd send it, and the system would be like, I only support 9. Why are you sending me 12 and blow up there? But I don't think it's an issue. I don't think it's a blocker for the dialect purely. I think that's something that we can revisit and add restrictions in. We might need to change the schema a little bit in the future to do it like rel, so we can set a parameter. Precision timestamp has like P as a bound thing, decimal has DNS, and the other ones have this. But I don't think we need to introduce it now.
I think the same thing exists in several places, right? Like you could say like, hey, I support arrays, but I only support integer arrays. I'm pretty sure I work with a system that's
yeah, that's the thing that comes up.
Like it doesn't support string arrays. It just supports integer arrays. And so to me, it's like, if I haven't looked at the dialect thing recently, but if there's a simple way to support the ability in the future to add properties for expressing constraints around the binding variables, that seems like it would be good.
I guess the thing
right? Like if you've got list of T.
If we make the types like in the same way that we have the relations where they're like an object bound, and we can say like, here's the object for a type, and right now it's blank, but in the future we can be like, okay, for arrays, for example, the generic parameter, the spec is P or whatever, bind that name to like supported types or other restrictions on it. That can be retrofitted on top. Now, I would say if we wanted to do that, it might make sense to switch. So right now it's just a list of strings. I think the short code names, David, for the types.
Yeah, I think so.
If we made them objects that we could add arbitrary properties to them in the future, like that would be like backwards compatible because we can always just add in extra properties.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
I have to say, I said this last time we talked about this, and I'm going to say it again. The more we talk about those things, the more I'm like, I think that we should just write the spec now to allow strings or objects, like a one of. So for all the simple cases, we could just write strings. And then for the one relation that has a property, or the one type that has properties that we want to add to it, we can add them. But just define it as one of now, that is the string, which basically implicitly is the wrapper of, etc.
Every short name can use, every non-parameterized type can use the string, and even the parameterized types that we don't restrict can use it. That's also an option. I'm okay with that too.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, my experience is most tools I've worked with support and not comprehend a one of schema. So I don't know. I'm not doing the work. David seems to be doing the work. So David, it's your implementer's choice. But I feel like we're over engineering for rare cases, which is going to make it so that everybody who looks at the dialect is like, oh, this is fucking verbose.
I mean, I don't know if I call them rare cases because I'm actively building stuff off of David's work in progress because we have a lot of internal systems that I really want to give dialects to, so I can tell people like, here's what the system claims to do. And we have some other people working internally and actually, given a dialect, can you actually run? Well, System X claims to support dialect. Run the functions from the core spec it claims to support against it, and actually verify that it does the things and respects options and all that jazz.
No, I'm not arguing the usefulness and the fact that they will be used. I'm not arguing that. I'm saying that when you're trying to teach someone a dialect file, that's what I'm thinking about. Is it's like, hey, let's start by showing you a simple dialect file. Here's how it is, and then you'd be like, oh yeah, like, and then be like, okay, now here's a more complex one for one of our systems, and you can see that we've added, like, for some of these relations, we have more, specific constraints, right, or more specific type constraints or whatever. But it's like, how do you build the knowledge? So yeah. So yeah, I'm not dismissing the value of it.
Please don't read the dialect schema definition file. I'm losing my. It's more. I almost need ChatGPT to tell me what it does.
Are you becoming a JSON schema expert?
No, I'm just passing things to ChatGPT whenever.
Go look at the spec again. It's been like 3 years since I actually had to deal with it. It was like, oh, this is the whole thing again.
I just like the fact that once you have a JSON schema, you can say like, hey, language X, build me bindings.
Yeah, that's what I've done for my experiment stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. But I think people are looking at dialects. I think we've go comment on the PR. Let's get it in. Let's make dialects a real thing. Then we can.
Yeah, because after this, we have to go and retrofit the Substrate Go to support these dialects.
Yeah,
so that should be fun.
Yeah, and then the other PR that's kind of a bump is the relation anchor PR. I think I had one question on it, which was, I guess, Jax, you were like, so I guess for context, right now, relation references are like ordinals into an array of references. What's being proposed is let's turn that into like proper anchors like everything else. So instead of saying that this ref at ref index 1, it's this ref with anchor bound number. It makes people happy. It makes it easier to merge plans in, apparently. And that's a feature. I think for me, it makes it more consistent with everything else. And like the one question I have is that, I guess, Jax, we were talking about like, let's put it in a one-off with like, let's have the two ones live side by side in a one-off and then remove the other one.
What's the number here? I'm trying. I got too many. I can't find what the fuck you're looking at.
Yeah. Anchor for not. It's by Trin. Posted it in chat.
All right, thank you. I kind of remember what you're talking about, but I feel like I last thought about it like 17 years ago. Yeah, okay, it was last year.
It was like, it's like a couple of months old. I got bumped and I was like, oh, this actually seems pretty straightforward. This is the feedback that I gave. One of which contradicts you is like, let's not call them subtree references because we don't have a concept of a subtree in the substrate algebra. Let's call it like plan rel reference or something. It's like a plan rel object. And then the other one, that was generic. The one that contradicts you is like, let's not put it in a one-off because like my thing is like, we have one field, you want to make it two fields, and then remove the other field. It's like, move it in a one-off, have two fields, remove the one-off, pull it out. Like, that seems annoying.
Every time you said the one-off until just now, I heard one-off. I was like, what is he talking about? What the fuck is he talking about? One-off? What did I say about one-off?
I don't see it more.
Let's put these in a one-off. Oh. Are you leaving, Weston? See ya. I feel like he didn't say anything. I think that may have been an AI avatar version of Weston.
We've done both before. In some cases, we've just added a second field and deprecated the old one. In some cases, we've moved it into a one of. This made Substrate Go unhappy because technically that's a breaking change in the generated Go code. It's no longer as much of an issue because that code is no longer in Substrate Go. But yeah, it's one of those things that it's not a breaking change except for the library that generates the code. It's like, that's great. I love protobufs.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, ignoring the libraries, I was not making the decision based on the libraries. I'm making the decision based on like what like if this field, if you should never set both fields. Because like from protobuf's perspective, a one of is not a breaking change.
Yeah, moving a thing into a one of and adding a field isn't breaking. Moving a field from a one of is
It's optional. So as long as you leave it optional, if you make it required, then it would be breaking.
Like if you have I think my understanding is if you have a one of a single field, you can pull it out of the one of and that's fine. If you have a one of multiple fields and then you remove a field, like I don't know how that works.
Yeah. Well, if you remove a field, it's breaking. there's no doubt about it.
I guess if you would never remove it from the one off, if you make it deprecated and then
at some point you would remove it from the one of. So your concern is that the later when you remove it from the one of?
Yeah, it'd be kind of annoying because like my thing is like we can deprecate it, have it live side by side for a couple of releases, and actually remove the deprecated version and just.
Yeah, I don't have a super strong opinion about it. Like I kind of feel like there's a question of like I generally think it's better when breaking changes happen that compilers help people figure it out. I guess it really wouldn't though, because the one of it's not going to help you because you're going to set the one field and you're going to set the other field and it's going to protobuf's like, yeah, fine, set both of them. I'm just going to ignore the first set.
Yeah, your consumer will ignore the one that's no longer there, and then.
Yeah, and the producer will set both of them, and the compiler's not going to tell them. So, yeah, I guess maybe there's no like in general, that's my goal. Is if the semantics of the language or the compiler can catch something that is a breaking change, so people don't make the mistake, that's better.
Yeah.
So, but I feel like, this case, I don't have a super strong opinion.
Migration-wise, it's actually better to have both because then you can cursorily you can set both during the migration period and then remove the one that you don't want to support in the future. It's actually a feature.
Well, but the problem is if you set both, then what is the consumer supposed to do?
I think it would differentially use the ordinal reference and then fall back, or it would use one of them and fall back to the other. You have to specify it in the code.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that's probably but like you should specify that the new one takes precedent.
Cool. So yeah, if you're not tied to a one-off, I'll make a comment on it about like thinking about it from the migration perspective of like we should do X, Y, Z, and then like pull that out, and then we can get that in. Just try to do about
the only thing that I found it's sort of previously we haven't actually said that reference rels refer to plan relations. They said relations, which means that if we're going to start putting anchors on plan relations and start calling this pointing to plan relations, then it's either a clarification or
I'm confused about your comment. I feel like maybe it was just like bad writing. Because I don't know how you would refer to anything other than
because you could go through and you could enumerate every single relation in let's say you decided that you wanted to use a reference rel and you had a single plan relation. You just say, I want to point to the fifth relation in a depth first search.
No, that's not what that means right now. Right now, the reference is to like the root level plan object has a repeated plan rel, which is an array of plan rels. And we're saying is like what we can attach to the plan rel object is also just an ID on it, basically.
Okay, so my point is that the documentation is a little bit unclear in that spot. Yeah. And so if it makes it totally works if you're going to say, okay, we're only going to do this in a plan relation. This is what you use the additional plan relations for, and now the documentation about exactly what plan relations slightly changes because now we're changing.
Wait, do we currently claim that you can reference stuff within a?
Sorry, Victor. What did you say?
Wait, we don't have anywhere in the spec that says that the reference for all this is something inside of a specific subject that a plant was to the root of the tree, isn't it?
It's the root of the tree, yeah. It's the root of one of the other trees. But maybe it's not as well specified. And I don't know if David's saying it's not specified in the protobuf or it's not specified on the website.
It's wherever I picked up what it was. It wasn't clear. So and my general problem is I go to the protobuf for documentation and not the website because I've been trained to put the code in your documentation next to your code and not in a separate place. So so I missed the website option
from last time, which is is the protobuf specification is just one way to serialize it. And if you want other serialization formats, then the documentation needs to be outside of the protobufs as well, because the protobuf is a reflection of the core spec, and then other formats are reflections of that. We can have a JSON.
But that's theoretical, right? As long as we only have one format, it's kind of theoretical, right? It's yes, that's why I did it. That's why I thought it was important. Is that we don't want to have only one implementation. You think about Iceberg, right? Iceberg or Arrow. The specification is outside of any particular language binding, right? The C definition of Arrow doesn't have all the documentation about the Arrow format, right? The problem is that we have a serialization format, we have this intermediate thing, which So the moment we have two of them, I don't think anybody's going to have as much issue. And the second one is used a lot. But as long as we only have one, it's
Yeah, no, for sure. Cool. Okay, I think that's all that I had on the agenda. There's probably many, many more PRs that require things, but
did the Java thing resolve itself this morning?
Publishing the Maven.
I think someone was saying that it did publish, but the action didn't succeed. No, Niels and Best before today seem to be following up on that, so I'm just leaving it to them.
Okay.
I'm spelling new committees soon.
Yeah, it's actually so the funny part is that it said so the build, I ran the build and then had this thing where it was trying 1 out of 101 retries, trying 2 out of 101 retries, trying 3, and so after the 5th or 6th retry, I'm this seems broken. I'm killing it, and he's saying oh, you should have just let it go. Maybe Central's just slow, so I'll run it again.
It's kind of wild.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we've got another week and a half to figure that out. Well, they're not being published.
Well, I'm clicking release, so it's going to release it.
It's going to release. I mean.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, boys. Well, have a good couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Everyone.
Good seeing everybody.